welcome back to Bookish Dives. I am really glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, it's really great to be back.
And just to set the stage for anyone who might be tuning in for the very first time, this isn't our first show. We've done a couple before.
Right, a few deep dives into some pretty heavy topics.
Exactly. But today today feels a bit more personal because we are tackling a massive subject. Basically, the biology of why we do what we do.
It is definitely the most introspective thing we've covered. I mean, we're asking why humans are capable of the most horrific violence, and then, in the exact same hour, the most profound acts of kindness.
Yeah. And our guide for this whole journey is Robert M. Sapolsky's book, Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst.
Which is just a massive encyclopedia.
Well, it's a total doorstopper.
Yeah.
But Sapolsky, he's a neurobiologist and a primatologist, so he brings this incredible range. He looks at a human and sees a great ape, but he also sees a moral philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really love about his approach is that he just flat out refuses to simplify things. He starts the book by admitting he has no easy answers.
Just better questions.
Exactly. And he hooks you right away in the introduction with this wild paradox. He shares this vivid, recurring fantasy he's had since he was a kid.
Yeah, the one about hunting down Hitler.
Right. And it is surprisingly graphic for a science book.
It really is.
He describes the whole scene, neutralizing Hitler's elite guards, bursting into the bunker, wrestling the Luger out of his hand. But he doesn't just arrest him. He talks about severing Hitler's spine, blinding him, and keeping him alive just to inject him with a cancer that creates agony in every single cell of his body.
It's visceral, torture-level violence.
And then he completely pulls the rug out from under you because he reminds us that he, Robert Sapolsky, is a card-carrying pacifist.
Right.
He opposes the death penalty. He's the kind of guy who catches spiders in his house and carries them outside in a cup.
So how does a pacifist have a fantasy about brutally torturing someone?
That is the core question. It forces you to confront this uncomfortable idea that we don't actually hate violence.
We just hate the wrong kind of violence.
Exactly.
We love violence when it's the right kind. We cheer for it on a football field or in an action movie or when it's just war protecting our kin. Sapolsky's point is that the biology of good aggression, like defending your child, and bad aggression, like a random bar fight, is startlingly similar. The context is what changes everything.
And to really understand that context, he says we have to stop thinking in categories. He calls it the bucket thinking problem.
The categorical thinking trap. It's basically how we are all taught to process the world.
Right. He uses that old joke, why did the chicken cross the road?
Oh, yeah, the chicken analogy.
If you ask an evolutionary biologist, they'll say, well, over millions of years, chickens that crossed to mixed genes survived.
But if you ask a bioengineer, they completely ignore the genes and talk about the fulcrum in the leg bone and the physics of torque.
And then the neurochemist chimes in and talks about estrogen levels making the chicken responsive to a male's signal.
And usually these experts just stay in their separate lanes. They each say, this is the one true explanation.
Which is exactly where they get it wrong. Sapolsky's whole mission with this book is to smash those buckets.
You cannot explain a behavior like pulling a trigger or just touching someone's arm by only looking at genes or only looking at childhood.
They are completely intertwined. You can't talk about a gene without the environment that turned it on.
Right. So to solve this, he builds what I think is just a brilliant narrative device.
The time machine.
Yes, the time machine framework.
He starts with the behavior itself. So let's stick with the example of someone pulling a trigger. He asks, what happened 1 second before that? Then what happened minutes before? Hours, days, years, all the way back to human evolution.
It forces you to see the absolute continuity of it all.
So let's step into that time machine. We are at 1 second before the finger is tightening on the trigger. Yeah. What is happening in the brain right at that split second?
Well, we have to talk about the amygdala.
The famous fear center.
Right. In popular culture, it's the fear center, but it's really about aggression and anxiety. It is the brain's alarm bell.
And it is incredibly fast.
Milliseconds.
Yeah.
We're talking milliseconds. If you flash a picture of a face that is threatening, or even just a face of a different race, sadly, the amygdala activates before the visual cortex has even finished processing the image.
Wow.
You are physiologically reacting before you even consciously know what you're looking at.
So the amygdala is screaming fire, but obviously we don't shoot every time we get startled.
Thankfully, no. And that is because of the frontal cortex.
Sitting right up there behind your forehead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the most recently evolved part of the brain. It's kind of the parent of the brain. It handles impulse control, long-term planning, emotional regulation.
I actually wrote down Sapolsky's definition of the frontal cortex because it is just perfect. He says its job is to make you do the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
The harder thing. That is the crucial part.
Yeah.
Because the amygdala path is easy. It's automatic. The frontal cortex is metabolically expensive. It takes a ton of energy.
Which explains why when you're tired or hungry or stressed, your self-control just completely slips.
Your frontal cortex literally does not have the fuel to tell the amygdala to shut up.
So violence often happens when that balance tips. The amygdala screams do it, and the frontal cortex is too weak to say don't.
Exactly. And remember, this is happening in response to sensory inputs we might not even be conscious of. This pushes us into the seconds to minutes before time frame.
Subliminal cues.
Right. Sapolsky cites these wild studies showing that if you're sitting in a room with a bad smell, like garbage, you are actually more likely to be socially conservative and judgmental in a survey.
That is so bizarre.
Or if you're holding a warm cup of coffee, you perceive the people around you as warmer and friendlier.
It's a little terrifying. You think you're making a purely rational moral judgment, but your brain is just reacting to the temperature of your latte.
We desperately want to believe we are rational agents, but we are constantly being primed by our environment.
Okay, so that's the immediate split-second firing. But those neurons are swimming in a chemical soup that changes over longer periods. Let's dial the time machine back. Hours to days before.
Hormones.
Yes, hormones. And this is where the book really goes to town on busting some deeply held myths. Because everyone thinks they know what testosterone does.
Oh, absolutely. It's the rage hormone.
Right. The idea is you pump a guy full of testosterone and he becomes a violent beast. Roid rage, all of that. It seems so cut and dry.
Except the science shows something much more nuanced. Testosterone does not create aggression out of thin air.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't invent a behavior that wasn't already there. What it does is lower the threshold for existing neural pathways.
So it just turns up the volume.
Exactly. Sapolsky describes this great study with monkeys. You take a middle-ranking monkey, a guy who is submissive to the alpha but bullies the guys below him. You inject him with massive amounts of testosterone.
Let me guess, he doesn't go fight the alpha.
He absolutely does not.
Yeah.
He becomes a total nightmare to the monkeys below him. He avoids the alpha even more.
Wow.
The testosterone didn't make him brave. It just amplified his existing social strategy. He's still a jerk, just a much louder jerk.
And completely flips the script.
It really does. It's actually about status. In primates, aggression is just how you maintain status. But human social games are so much weirder.
Yeah, we can gain status by being generous or pious.
Right. So if you're in a social circle where the coolest person is the one who volunteers the animal shelter,
High testosterone will make you aggressively generous.
you will ladle that suit faster than anyone else. It drives you to do whatever your specific culture rewards to maintain dominance.
It's a status molecule, not a violence molecule. That is fascinating. Okay, let's look at the flip side. Oxytocin, the famous love hormone.
Ah, yes, the cuddly hormone.
This is the good guy, right? That popular narrative is that if we just put oxytocin in the water supply, we'd have world peace.
I know you're setting me up because you know the answer is that it's complicated.
I am setting you up.
Putting it in the water supply would be a complete disaster. Yes, oxytocin promotes bonding and empathy, and this is a massive, but it only does that for your in-group.
Us, your team, your tribe.
Correct. Sapolsky cites these Dutch experiments where they gave people oxytocin and then presented them with moral dilemmas. And the dilemmas involved people with Dutch names versus people with German or Middle Eastern names.
And what did the oxytocin do?
It made them more cooperative with the Dutch names, sure, but it actually made them more aggressive and preemptively nasty toward the outsiders.
Oh, wow.
It didn't make them universally loving. It made them more parochial.
So it's not the universal love hormone. It's the my team versus your team hormone.
Exactly. It sharpens that boundary between us and them. And biologically, humans are incredibly fast at making that distinction.
Which leads us further back in the time machine. How are those boundaries built in the brain in the first place?
Now we are at days to years before childhood and adolescence.
And this is where neuroplasticity comes in. The fact that the brain physically changes based on your experiences.
And the star of the show here is the frontal cortex again, because it is a late bloomer.
Very late.
The rest of the brain, the visual systems, the emotional centers, they're pretty much fully wired by childhood. But the frontal cortex isn't fully online until your mid-20s.
Which explains pretty much everything about teenagers.
It really does. A teenager has a fully adult accelerator. The amygdala and reward systems are firing on all cylinders, but they are driving with a learner's permit braking system.
But Sapolsky argues that this is not a bug in our evolution.
No, it's a critical feature.
How is being an emotional, risk-taking mess a feature?
Well, think about it. If your frontal cortex was fully hardened at age 5, you would be stuck with the social rules and behaviors of a 5-year-old forever.
Oh, I see.
By delaying that maturation until the mid-20s, evolution ensures that the most complex part of our brain is sculpted by our actual environment and our culture.
It makes us adaptable. We learn the specific social code of the world we actually live in.
Exactly. We are built to be molded, but that molding starts even earlier, down in childhood.
Right. And here he gets into epigenetics. The idea that experience can chemically tag your DNA to turn certain genes on or off.
The rat pup studies are the classic example of this. If a mother rat licks and grooms her pups a lot, it causes a chemical change that physically lowers stress hormones in those pups for the rest of their lives.
And if she ignores them?
Those genes stay switched off. The pups grow up to be anxious, high-stress adults.
It is wild to think that how much you were held as a baby changes the physical expression of your DNA 30 years later.
It completely destroys the idea that you can separate nature from nurture. They are literally the exact same process.
Speaking of nurturing and aggression, we have to talk about lollipop ballistics.
Oh, my favorite anecdote in the whole book.
It's just so perfect. So, Sapolsky's in the car with his wife and kids. His wife is driving. Some guy cuts them off. Total jerk move. Really dangerous. His wife honks, and the guy flips them off. Now, Sapolsky is mad, but his wife goes into full mama bear mode.
She doesn't just let it slide.
Not at all. She tails him. She follows this guy until he gets stuck at a red light. She jumps out of the car. Sapolsky's sitting there thinking they're about to die.
Right.
She marches up to the guy's window, pounds on it. He rolls it down, looking terrified. And she says to him, if you could do something that mean to another person, you probably need this.
And she throws a lollipop into his car.
She assaulted him with candy to try and fix his childhood.
It's hilarious. But biologically, it is so profound. The mechanisms that drive maternal care protecting the young are intimately tied to aggression.
Oxytocin again.
Exactly. To protect us, she had to attack them. It's this weird human mix of bamboo flutes and burning villages.
Bamboo flutes and burning villages. That really is the human condition in a nutshell.
It is.
Okay, we have to go back even further. We've done childhood. Now we are at centuries to millennia before.
Genetics and evolution.
And this is where everyone usually just wants a simple answer. They want to find the gene for aggression.
Right. And for a long time, the media pushed this idea that they found it. The MAOA gene. The warrior gene.
The narrative was basically, if you have this gene, you are a born criminal. You're prone to antisocial violence.
But Sapolsky just rips this apart with the actual data.
He brings up the Caspi study, right?
Yes, it's a landmark study. When they actually looked at people with the warrior gene, they found that having the gene alone predicted absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
Zero. If you had the gene, but you had a loving, safe childhood, you were no more violent than anyone else.
So when does the gene actually matter?
It only matters if the person also suffered severe childhood abuse. It's the combination. The gene creates a vulnerability, but the environment have to pull the trigger.
That is such a vital distinction. It means we aren't just robots blindly programmed by our DNA.
Exactly. Genes are not destiny, they're propensities.
But the environment isn't just your parents, it's your entire culture.
Which brings us to the millennia before time frame. Evolution.
And again, Sapolsky complicates the picture. Because we always ask, are we naturally violent like chimps or peaceful like bonobos?
Because we share about 98% of our DNA with both of them.
Right.
Chimps can be incredibly violent. They literally commit organized murder against neighboring troops. Bonobos, on the other hand, settle almost every conflict with sex. Very peaceful.
And humanity is just this confused middle ground.
We are a cocktail. We have the capacity for chimp-like violence and bonobo-like empathy. We aren't a strictly tournament species where males just fight for dominance, but we aren't strictly pair bonding either. We are highly adaptable.
And we've added this massive layer of culture on top of it all. The discussion on poverty really struck me.
Oh, that is crucial. Sapolsky argues that humans actually invented poverty.
Because in a baboon troop, being a low-ranking male is stressful, but you don't feel poor in the abstract sense.
Right. Humans created a socioeconomic hierarchy where low status is a massive, sustained biological stressor.
And that chronic stress physically changes the brain.
It atrophies the frontal cortex and enlarges the amygdala. It locks you in fight or flight mode. It's not just a social issue, it is a biological toxicity.
Wow. So we've gone from milliseconds to millennia. Which brings us to the final and honestly the heaviest part of the deep dive, the big picture.
Free will.
Yeah. If our behavior is caused by neurons firing a second ago, which were primed by smells minutes ago, driven by hormones days ago, sculpted by childhood and genes and evolution, where is the room for free will?
This is definitely the part that makes people uncomfortable, because Sapolsky is extremely skeptical of free will.
He calls it mitigated free will, right?
Yeah. He argues that what we call free will is mostly just biology we haven't discovered yet.
That's a huge claim.
But think about it historically. We used to think seizures were demonic possession. Now we know it's a biological storm in the brain. We used to think people with learning disabilities were just lazy. Now we understand cortical development.
He uses this great image of the homunculus, the idea of a little person inside our head making independent choices.
Right, and he says the homunculus is running out of places to hide. Every time science peels back a layer, the space for a magical, non-biological chooser gets smaller and smaller.
But if that's true, if I am just the sum of my biology and history, does my choice to be a good person even matter? It sounds incredibly depressing.
He argues it shouldn't be depressing. It should actually be liberating. It should be the basis for a radical new kind of compassion.
How so?
Because if someone does something terrible, we can look at it and say, this isn't just an evil soul. This is a biological outcome of damage, of abuse, of a frontal cortex that didn't form right.
It shifts us from judgment to understanding.
Exactly. But it goes the other way, too.
What do you mean?
If someone achieves something great, if they're disciplined, brilliant, kind, that is also a biological outcome. They won the lottery of genes and environment.
So saying you worked so hard is really just as biologically loaded as saying you were so tall.
Yes. It levels the playing field completely. It demands that we look at people with a sense of biological context rather than moral superiority.
That is a tough pill to swallow, but it's powerful. So where does this leave us? What is the main takeaway for you, the learner listening right now?
The takeaway is really just, it's complicated.
That's basically the bumper sticker for the whole book.
It is. There's never one single cause. You can never say someone did something just because of their genes or just because of their hormones.
It is always a mix. Biology, environment, culture, all dancing together. Context is everything. I want to leave you with a thought from the very end of the book. Sapolsky quotes Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner. He said, "The opposite of love is not hate. Its opposite is indifference."
And the biology completely backs that up. That's the beauty of it.
Right.
Love and hate are physiologically very similar. High arousal, high heart rates, intense focus. Indifference is the true opposite. It's the absence of engagement.
So perhaps our goal shouldn't be to eliminate aggression entirely, but to steer it. To understand the machinery under the hood so we don't drive blindly into a ditch.
Well said.
This has been quite a journey, and to you listening right now, I know this was a lot. We just compressed a massive, dense book into a single conversation.
We barely even scratched the surface of the US versus them mechanism.
Exactly. So please make sure you follow Bookish Dives. We have plenty more of these deep dives coming up, and we don't want you to miss a single insight.
There is always more to uncover.
And as a final thought to mull over, if our biology reacts so strongly to just holding a warm cup of coffee, how is your amygdala reacting right now to the constant algorithmic sorting of your social media feeds?
Oh, that's a whole other can of worms.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us today, and until next time, keep your frontal cortex engaged.
And watch out for lollipops.
See you next time.